Chapter 16 Silver Lake. From the very moment he woke up, Lincoln knew he was sleeping on the tent he and Lenny had set up in the house backyard. The sound of the wind blowing against the tent in the semi-darkness didn't confuse him nor scared him. He didn't also find strange that his feet were cold, since they'd been out of the blanket for most of the part of the night. And even though, judging by the light that was filtering from the outside, the day was promising to have nice weather, the tent didn't offer much protection against the night cold. Only his feet had that problem, though. All his upper body was comfortable and warm. It wasn't only because that part was indeed covered by blankets, but it was also because he was literally laying on top of his sister Luna, with his head resting on her chest and her sister's arms embracing him over his shoulders. It had been a long night. They had cried a lot. They had expressed all the feelings they hidden deep inside of them. According to his watch, they had stayed awake until 3 in the morning, which meant they had cried all their fears, all their sadness, all their pain for almost 5 hours. When the weariness consumed all their energy and they ran out of tears, Luna lied down. Her arms didn't let go of her little brother, so she dragged him along, letting him rest atop her. 10 days ago, Lincoln might have found that situation a little awkward. But right then, he could only feel grateful for having sisters that loved him so much. The position reminded him of previous years when he was a kid, a young, little kid, and some of his older sisters would decide to have a nap with him. "Luna, do you remember that song you used to sing me when I was a kid?" he had asked. "Yeah," she answered, stroking little locks of his hair. "Do you think... could you?" He was afraid it would sound stupid, that it would make him look childish. He couldn't finish the question, but Luna understood him right away, and it didn't even cross her mind to make fun of him. She simply started to sing him the same old song she sang him so many times before. She sang it, feeling Lincoln's chest moving with each breath, until the movement was slow and steady. Only when her brother fell asleep, she allowed herself to surrender to her tiredness. They had both unburdened all they had been keeping inside, and even if Lincoln's idea had been to help his sister, the truth is that he needed it too. He hadn't realized how much he needed to be able to cry openly, to be able to mourn with anyone else for what was happening to him. For him, that night had also lifted a weight off his shoulders. He thought he heard the sound of some voices from very far away, so he carefully sat up next to his sister. She also started to move a little and mumble something. Almost after yawning and stretching his arms, Lincoln checked the time on his wristwatch, Adrian's watch. It was 9 o'clock on Sunday morning. The rest of his sisters were probably having breakfast right now. "Luna," he called her, gently shaking her shoulder. His sister finally reacted, opening up her eyes. She did seem to be a little confused for an instant, but her eyes quickly focused on Lincoln. She also sat up and stretched her arms, trying to fully awake herself. "Morning, bro," she said, getting close enough to give him a kiss on his cheek. "Sorry for waking you up." "No, it's okay," she assured him, flinching a little and taking a hand out to her lower back. "Ouch, I guess you're not as lightweight as you used to be. I think I know why I stopped taking naps with you." Lincoln couldn't stop his cheeks from blushing, to his sister's amusement. "Don't worry, Linky," she said, giggling. "What time is it anyway?" 9 in the morning. We should go and have some breakfast." He started to get up, but Luna grabbed him by his sleeve. He looked back to see what she wanted, but before he could react, his sister gave him yet another kiss on his right cheek. "Let's go, sweet child of mine," she whispered, smiling at him as she stood up and opened the tent's entry. Hearing her speaking in lyrics was enough to plant a big smile on Lincoln's face. Luna stepped out of the tent, and he stood up to follow her. But at the last second he remembered that he left his bedroom key inside Luna's guitar case, to avoid losing it. After so many years without any kind of privacy, he was still having trouble getting used to have to carry a key. Once he took it and put it into one of his pockets, he walked out of the tent as well. The day, as he supposed, was incredibly nice. Only little strokes of white interrupted the radiant blue sky. There was a small breeze that, with them being in their pajamas only, was a little uncomfortable, but it wasn't that much of a problem. They crossed the backyard, heading to the kitchen's back door, regretting not having their shoes and walking barefoot on the wet grass. As he walked along his sister, Lincoln realized he felt different. He felt like he was having more energy. He noticed he was more optimistic. He felt more alive. It was more than the sensation of knowing his sister was a bit better. It was more than a feeling of great weight off his shoulders. It was more than just an emotional state. It was like his body had rested several weeks overnight. He thought such a dramatic change after only one night was really strange, but he wasn't going to complain. It had been a long time since he felt so good. Have you thought what we're going to tell Lucy, Lola, Lana, and Lisa if they're wondering what we're doing? Asked Luan as he got nearer to the kitchen. No, actually, he said, moving a hand to his nape. I guess we can, I don't know, improvise something? Luna turned around to flash him a smile. We'll figure something out. Although, she said, and her smile hesitated, when are you planning on telling them girls? You got 4 of your sisters in the dark, Lincoln. I still believe that they have the right to know the truth. Lisa knows, he simply said. He was walking right behind his sister, so he bumped into her when she suddenly stopped. Lisa? She asked, raising her eyebrows. But when? She figured it out on her own, he answered. Luna seemed to be utterly suspicious by that revelation. She remained in silence for several seconds, with her gaze lost. Wow. I guess I should have seen that coming. But how did she take that? She asked, biting her lower lip. Lincoln sighed. Was it worth telling Luna that their younger sister was looking for a cure for his disease? No. He couldn't do that to her. He couldn't give his older sisters any kind of hope. What if Lisa didn't make it? His older sisters were already suffering like they'd never had so far in their lives. He felt and saw their pain, the burden of the situation, the agony of the resignation. They were just suffering so much, as if to give them the hope that it all might be avoided. If he gave them that hope, and then took it from them, he would be causing them twice the tremendous pain. He himself preferred to pretend that Lisa wasn't working on anything, because not even he dared to believe that there was a chance that it might all turn out okay. It was too good to be true. He couldn't let himself be that naive. She's dealing with this in her own way, he answered, avoiding Luna's eyes, fearing that his sister might see that he wasn't being totally honest with her. I'll try to speak with her, but for now, I think she needs some time on her own. I'll talk with them all soon. I know I can't keep them away from this much longer. I promise you, I'll tell them. If she noticed anything weird in Lincoln, Luna didn't let on. She simply nodded, and took a look at the kitchen's door to make sure that there was no one looking at them, and she gave him a tight hug. It's okay, bro. Just do it when you're ready. You know you can count with the rest of us for whatever you need, right? Of course, he assured her, hugging her too. And you know that any time you want to talk, play, or just be with me, you've got to ask, right? Yes, she said with a smile, breaking off from the hug. It was clear that she didn't want to get too emotional and cry before breakfast. I know. Let's go inside, dude. They climbed those little steps before the kitchen's back door, and Luna opened it up, going inside, followed close by her brother. Unfortunately, all their sisters were there already, so Lincoln knew that they would have to come up with an excuse about why he slept in a tent with Luna. Luckily, though, some small arguments were taking place right now between Lucy and Lynn, and the twins. Maybe if they were quiet enough, they could. I come! Lily crawled her way to her brother, babbling until she reached his legs, tugging his pajama bottoms to get his attention. She not only got Lincoln's attention, but also alerted the other 8 girls that Lincoln and Luna had just entered the kitchen, in their pajamas, from the backyard. The fights ended abruptly. The few seconds of silence were everlasting for Lincoln, who just waited for the surprise to pass and for his sisters to start their assault on him. And just as he predicted, 3 seconds after, Lily caught everyone's attention and ruined Lincoln's chances of tiptoeing his way out. The twins, Lucy, Lynn, and Luan, gathered around him and Luna, all of them speaking at the same time. Luan seemed barely worried, mostly interested in knowing where had they been. Lynn did look kind of worried about Lincoln, but he couldn't take her worry seriously because he was focusing more on the fact that she was wearing an apron and kitchen gloves. Lucy was asking with suspicion, but the twins had let their differences aside to complain about not having been invited to a secret party. Lincoln sighed, as his sisters kept throwing him questions. He had enough experience with this kind of chaos, so he simply decided to stop trying to focus on what they were saying, and just ignore them until they settled down. He ducked and lifted Lily from the ground. She wasn't asking him where he'd been. She didn't demand to know where he had spent the night, or why she wasn't invited. She was just happy to see him again, and she showed it by grabbing some locks of his hair, and playfully pulling at him, causing him some pain. He let her play with his hair until his baby sister threatened to tear his scalp. He quickly gave her a little kiss on the tip of her nose, making her laugh and releasing her grip. "Lincoln, we're talking to you," complained Lana and Lola, getting their brother's attention. "All right," he finally said, resigned, cradling his baby sister so she wouldn't be pulling his hair. "What were you saying?" "We want to know where you been," asked Lana, crossing her arms over her chest. "And what has Lola doing with you?" added Lola, putting her hands on her hips. "Oh yeah, right," he started to say, trying to earn some time to come up with an excuse. "Well, you see," he came up with many excuses in his head, each one more improbable and less credible than the last. His younger sisters were innocent and easily manipulable for someone as sharp and perceptive as Lincoln, but they were no fools. And when they were angry, not even the best excuse could convince them. They might even reject the truth. Fortunately, Luna saved him the trouble. "Guys, it's my fault," she said, stepping forward. "I was really pissed off last night, so I sneaked off and made up my dad's tent in the backyard. I wanted to be alone, but Lincoln heard me and decided to bunk with me to cheer me up." The girls, with the exception of Lori, Lenny, Lisa, and Lily, looked worried at Luna. The memory of what she had done 2 nights prior was still fresh in their minds. Luan and Lynn, however, stared at Luna and Lincoln respectively, and with a simple exchange of looks they understood that there was more on that story than they could say in front of their younger siblings. Their faces relaxed a little bit. "But why did you let him in if you wanted to be alone?" asked Lola. Luna smiled and put an arm over his shoulders. "He can be very convincing," she said in a whisper, closing her eyes and embracing him a little tighter. Lincoln saw his older sisters staring at them with an impossible mixture of sadness and joy, sympathy and resignation, and he also saw his younger sisters raising an eyebrow. "Hey Lynn, what gives with the apron?" he asked in an obvious and poor attempt to change the subject. "Oh," she said, and Lincoln saw her freckled cheeks gaining color. "Yeah, about that." "She decided to cook you a special breakfast," answered Lucy in her place, crossing her arms like she was reproaching her something. He couldn't remember ever seeing Lynn so flustered. She was staring at the floor and nervously playing with her fingers, not daring to look at him. The twins weren't particularly interested in that topic, so they sat at the kiddie table, where their breakfasts were already served. As soon as they sat, they started to fight once again. Lincoln didn't know what to say to his sister. He looked at the countertop and saw a plate with what seemed to be a couple of little burnt hotcakes. "Are those for me?" asked Lincoln, gently breaking away from Luna's hug and walking to the countertop. Yeah. Yes, they're for you," said Lynn, ashamed. "But I think I let them on the fire for too long, and they ended up a little burnt. You can give them to Charles if you want." She pointed at the dog that was eating on his plate on the floor. The animal turned around his head for a second after hearing his name, but then jumped right back to his food. "I'm sure they'll be delicious," he assured her. "That's like super cute, Lynn," said Lenny, smiling the way only she could, spreading joy. The compliments only served to embarrass Lynn even more, although behind her blush there was a shy smile hidden. "But why did you decide to make him breakfast?" asked Lucy, still with her arms crossed over her chest. "You've never cooked before." Lincoln, who had grabbed a plate and a glass of milk with the intention of going to the kiddies' table to sit down and start to eat, stopped. Lynn was staring at Lucy, and she didn't seem to be ashamed or shy anymore. She looked like just like when someone insinuated that she wasn't that good at some sport, or when she was losing a Monopoly. "There's always a first time, right?" "And why did you cook for Lincoln? You didn't even make hotcakes for yourself." "Well, that's because..." "Yes?" It was hard to tell since she was still wearing her kitchen gloves, but Lincoln was pretty sure that Lynn was clenching her fist. She looked like she was about to scream, but oddly enough, his older sister just sighed and her face earned a playful look. "Do you really think I test my cooking abilities on my own food? No way. That's why I have my little test dummy here, who'll try them, even if they give him a stomachache later." As she made fun of him, she closed her arm around his neck, trapping him in a classic wrestling grab. But that time, Lynn wasn't squeezing his neck trying to keep him from breathing. Slyly, to not raise suspicions, she was gently grabbing him closer in some kind of tender hug. "A minute ago you said he could give them to Charles just because they're a little burnt," Lucy remarked. "But now you're implying that you don't really care whether Lincoln enjoys them or not? What's the truth, Lynn?" Lincoln felt Lynn's arm muscles tensing around his neck. "I'd love to have someone try them so they can tell me the truth about how I did. And I know Lincoln's the only one who agreed to do it," she self-explained, sounding too calm for Lincoln's taste. "It's the first time I ever did this, so I'm a little nervous. And I don't really want to make him eat something he doesn't want. Does my explanation satisfy your curiosity, Lucy?" "But why?" "That's enough! That's enough, Lucy," said Laurie, finally intervening, putting a hand on Lucy's shoulder. "Does it bother you that much that Lynn cooked Lincoln's breakfast?" "No, but..." "Does it affect you somehow?" "No." "Then let him be, Lucy," she said with a smile. The little goth let out a big sigh, grabbing her breakfast and went straight to the kiddies' table, sitting along Lisa, Lily, and the twins. Lincoln also was about to follow her, but Lenny stopped her. "Hey, Linky, would you like to go with us to the other table?" she asked with a smile. The rest of his older sisters were staring at him expectantly, holding their breaths as they waited for his answer. Lenny, however, was looking at him very calmly, with a smile that was just too sincere. Lenny was still a mystery for Lincoln. How much did she understand of what was going on? Was she conscious of what was actually going to happen? He thought he would need to ask Laurie for her opinion on the subject, to know what was really going on with his second oldest sister. It was a mystery, but in the end, Lincoln couldn't really complain. He took a look at the kiddie table. Lucy and Lisa were starting a food war between them. Lily was peacefully eating, making noise with her spoon. The twins were still arguing. It was clearly not the quietest environment. "What do you say?" Lenny insisted. Yeah, why not? He finally said, smiling at her. Judging by their faces, one could have believed that Lincoln's older sisters had just found out that Christmas was coming earlier this year. They walked with him to the grown-up table in the living room, with the most sincere smiles he remembered seeing in them in a long time. When he sat down, he noticed that Lynn immediately sat down right next to him, and Lenny was occupying the spot on the other side of him. Luna and Luan sat together, still very close, and Laurie chose to be right in front of Lincoln, on the other side of the table. You know, you really don't have to eat them if you don't want, said Lynn, distrusting her own hotcakes. Are you kidding? They look delicious, he said. He quickly cut a piece and tried his first mouthful of the day. They were a little crispy, yes, but they actually tasted better than he expected. Lynn, these are really good. His sister's face warmed up. Really? You don't have to lie to me, you know. No, seriously, these are great. Is this really the first time you tried this? Yes. Yeah, it's my first try, she answered, quickly blushing. Kudos, then. They are really good. Lynn grabbed her cup of coffee and took it to her mouth. It wasn't easy to drink with a smile from ear to ear, but she managed to avoid spilling anything. Lincoln, you didn't brush your hair, didn't you? Asked Lenny, frowning at his hair. No, I didn't go to the bathroom yet, Lincoln answered. Don't worry, I got this, she said with a smile. He thought she would take a comb out of her dress. He'd seen his sisters taking stranger things out of her clothes. But Lenny simply started to use her fingers to comb his hair. She started to accommodate his white locks without tugging or pulling, and without causing him any pain. Lincoln actually found himself enjoying that sort of massage, those soft and tender caresses with which his sister was combing his hair. So that's tent? Asked Luan, staring at Luna. Yeah, although you know, she said, lowering her voice to a whisper so she couldn't be heard from the kitchen. It was all Lincoln's idea. I figured so, she added, smiling a bit. And, could you talk things out? Yeah, we had a talk, Luna said, sadly looking at her cup of coffee. I really needed one. Luan put a hand over Luna's, gently stroking it. Lincoln knows how to give good talks, she simply said, and they both turned their heads to look at their brother. They were giving him looks full of sadness and nostalgia, which made him feel a little uncomfortable. He tried to smile to relieve the tension, but he forgot he was eating his hotcakes. So when he parted his lips, a bit of the mass fell from his mouth over his pajamas. All his sisters started to laugh after seeing that. Lincoln thought that an embarrassing act was worth seeing all his sisters laughing, even if they were laughing at him. Well, I sure hope Lincoln's talk helped you understand that we all love you, Luna, she said, laughing at the end. Get it? Lincoln, Lynn, and Laurie let out some groans, but the smile on their faces showed that they were happy to hear their sister's puns once again. Luna didn't let out a small chuckle, looking fondly at his younger sister, and then she turned her head to look at Laurie, this time looking at her with much regret. Laurie, I'm sorry. Sorry for all those things I said. It's okay, Luna, Laurie interrupted her. I was wrong too. No, it was my fault. I made some bad decisions, Luna said, getting ready to cry at any moment. Laurie made sure that none of their younger siblings were interested in what was going on in the dining room, stood up, and got closer to Luna. She didn't waste a second in standing up too and throwing herself at her older sister's arms. They embraced each other, Laurie gently stroking his little sister's back. Luna, it's okay. I forgive you, she told her. Really, I was just really worried. Sick. I promise I won't do that again. Not until you're 18, at least, added Laurie, breaking away from her sister. Luna laughed a little, and after wiping her eyes with the back of her hand, she sat once again next to Luan, while Lori got back to her seat and asked Lincoln about his hotcakes, earning a rough warning from Lynn to avoid making fun of her cooking abilities. Lincoln felt extremely happy. All his older sisters were in the table with him, and they were all smiling. Luna and Luan were having a nice, joyful chat, holding hands the entire time. Lori was smiling as she teased Lynn, asking her if she was planning on joining the middle school cooking team. And the sports girl aggressively snapped back that if she wanted, she could totally win the cooking Super Bowl, that no gold was beyond her if she really tried. Meanwhile, Lenny was still stroking Lincoln's hair, even though he was pretty sure that he didn't need to be combed anymore. She was still playing with locks of his hair, humming a random melody. In his 11 years of life, he never paid much attention to breakfast. He was usually pretty drowsy in the mornings, and having breakfast was just another thing in the routine, like brushing his teeth, something he didn't stop to think about. That morning, though, he dedicated a lot of time to just see his sisters having breakfast on the table, to see them laugh, to see them playfully teasing each other, to enjoy the contact between them, to enjoy the shared time. As he finished his second hot cake, Lincoln wished he had learned to enjoy his breakfast along his sisters before. The noise coming from the kitchen, where the kiddie table was, had been gradually increasing since the older siblings had walked to the dining room. It wasn't until they heard the sound of shattered glass that they were forced to intervene. They all stood up and went right into the kitchen. Lisa, Lucy, and Lily were staring open-mouthed at the twins, who were facing each other, separated only by a few inches, screaming right into each other's faces. There was a broken glass of milk on the floor. "You always ruin everything! Everything always has to go the way you want it to! Would it kill you to have some class? Is it so hard to share for you? I'm telling Mom you broke a glass! Well, I'll tell you, you broke a glass! Enough!" yelled Lori, while Lynn and Luna separated the twins. "What happened?" "I grabbed the milk carton first!" said both girls at the same time, looking at each other with hatred and mistrust. "Oh my God. Did you literally fight over who was getting a glass of milk first? It's her fault!" "Come on, you guys. You can't fight for everything," tenderly said Lenny, crouching down. She tried to make them look at each other, but Lana broke free from Luna's arms. "That's it! I'm not having breakfast with her!" Before even Lynn could react, which was quite a feat, Lana ran through her siblings' legs straight to the first floor. They were all stunned for a few seconds. Then, like it was usual, Lori reacted first. "Lynn, Luna, come with me. Let's go talk with her. Lenny, Luan, you stay here with Lola." "Should we raise the threat level to thunderstorm?" asked Lisa, referring to the sister fights protocol. "No. This isn't going to be at protocol level. We will end this before it gets there," said Lori, finally marching off with the two designated sisters to speak to Lana. The tension in the air could be cut with a butter knife. Lola was sitting on a chair, arms folded, apparently having lost her appetite. Lucy and Lisa were having turns at looking at each other and staring at the young blonde, whom simply had her eyes fixed on her plate. Lincoln couldn't help but feel guilty. If he told his sisters that, they would all surely try to tell him that he shouldn't blame himself, that it wasn't his fault at all. But Lincoln was convinced that he had part of the guilt. Lana and Lola were always fighting, like he could expect from twins with such different personalities. However, those fights were always in a somewhat playful way. They'd never had so serious fights in such a short time. Lincoln was pretty sure that this sudden animosity between them wasn't casual. It was clear for him that it had started ever since Lincoln had been taken to the hospital exactly 1 week ago. It wasn't the first time that the girls acted different because of a general grieving air in the house. On other occasions, like when their father had a hernia operation, or when Lynn had broken one of her elbows, the twins responded to the general grief by having more and more fights. It was their way of relieving the tension. Evidently, they felt something was off in the house, but they were too young and innocent to realize what. Feeling responsible for what was happening, Lincoln was determined to fix things between his younger sisters. Lenny was kneeling beside Lola, trying to talk some sense into her, but the younger one didn't want to listen to her. Luan had brought a mop and was cleaning the mess on the floor. Dodging her, Lincoln went next to Lola. "Hey," he called her, kneeling on the floor to be eye level with her. Lola was still crossing her arms, not looking at him. "Lola, look at me," he softly asked her. She was extremely authoritarian. She wasn't just as pretty as a princess. She also lived like she would have had to take a kingdom's throne one day, constantly practicing her air of superiority and bossy attitude. She didn't like receiving orders from anyone, and led only a few members of the family to give them orders. She obeyed her parents because she had to, and because deep down she knew that they only wanted the best for her. She obeyed Lori because she respected her leadership. And finally, she obeyed Lincoln because she loved him, and because she trusted him. He was more than just her big brother. He was someone she actually looked up to. She would never admit it out loud, but even though he had had the gross habit of reading comics in his underwear around the house, Lola really admired him in more than one way. Thus, when he asked ever so gently to look at him, she did. "You're on her side, aren't you?" she asked, putting and frowning at the same time. "What? You think it's all my fault, and you're with Lana, don't you?" she repeated. Lincoln was confused. "Lola, what are you talking about?" he asked, not believing what he was hearing. "What you heard! 2 days ago you went to plant trees with Lana and you left me alone. Now we're fighting again and you come here to nag me and tell me it was all my fault because you love her more." Lincoln's brain finally understood what was going on. His little sister was jealous. "Lola, you know that's not true." "Lincoln doesn't love Lana more than you. He doesn't have a favorite sister," added Lenny with a smile, although it hesitated for a second as she looked back at Lincoln. "Right?" He couldn't help a smile. "Of course I don't. You're all special to me, and I love you all the same. You, for example," he said, poking her nose with his index finger. "You are my special little princess, and you'll always be, Lola. Always." The tough expression on the girl softened after those words. She was having problems looking Lincoln in the eye, and she suddenly seemed to be interested in the kitchen's floor. "Now, what do you say if we go so you can apologize with Lana, all right?" Lincoln suggested. "But it wasn't entirely my fault," she replied, lacking conviction. "I'm not saying it was. I'm not blaming you. I'm pretty sure you were both equally responsible. You just apologize for your part, and I'll make sure she apologizes for hers. I'll go with you. Do you agree?" He offered her his hand. She looked at it, then at his eyes, and then at his hand again. Her lips insinuated at the smallest smile, but Lincoln detected it right away. She put her hand over his, let him grab it, and allowed Lincoln to help her stand up. Not being able to resist the impulse, she hugged Lincoln's leg as he gently stroked her hair. Lucy and Lisa were watching the scene with interest. Lily was just drooling on her food, and Luan and Lenny wanted to smile and cry at the same time. Lincoln and Lola, holding hands, walked straight to the twins' bedroom, but they stopped in the dining room when they saw Lori coming down from the stairs with Lana by her hand. Luna and Lynn appeared behind them. The oldest and the only boy in the family exchanged a smile. Seeing their twin getting closer, they both hid behind their older sibling's leg. But when they were just 4 feet away from each other, There was no point in trying to hide themselves. "You both have something to say," Laurie said. Lana looked at Laurie, and Lola looked at Lincoln. He nodded and tightened his grip on her hand. The twins sighed, staring at the floor, and they said, at the same time, "I'm sorry." They didn't seem to be really sorry, actually, but they were actually at least trying to make things up between them, and the other 9 siblings smiled at the scene. "Oh great, you're all here!" Mr. Lynn walked from the living room to the dining room. He was smiling from ear to ear, and they all noticed that he wasn't wearing his usual green sweater and brown pants. Instead, he was wearing some shorts that showed his hairy legs and an aquamarine short-sleeved shirt. It was a nice morning, no doubts about that, but it was weird to see him dressed like that. "How are you kids? Had breakfast yet?" he asked in a really good mood. His 11 kids remained in silence. "I'll take that as a yes." "Well, Lincoln, you better go to your room and dress up." "Why?" "We're going to the Museum of Natural Sciences. You like coins, don't you? I read there's an exposition of old drachmas and nobles from the ancient Greeks. It'll be fun." Collecting coins is a wonderful hobby. The story of the coins was a story as interesting as any A-savvy comic. Every time Lincoln shared his passion for coins, people would stare at him, judging him without knowing. He didn't care. He enjoyed doing what he loved. Any other time, he would have been delighted to be able to go with his father to a museum and see coins over 2,500 years old. But was it worth it to lose an afternoon with his sisters just to see some stupid coins? What good did it have to appreciate the texture, size, and inscriptions on a metal from millennia ago? His bucket list had nothing related to his coin collection. It was actually cramped with a lot of unmarked boxes about things related to his sisters, family, and friends. His priorities had suddenly changed. Now he would give all his hobbies away for just one more breakfast with his family. "Dad, I don't know if that's a good idea." "Son, go change your clothes, will you?" His father smiled and didn't hesitate at all. But Lincoln felt the change of tone. It was clear that there was no other option. Okay. Defeated, he climbed the stairs all the way to his room. With his mind somewhere else, he bumped his face against the door when he tried to open it, and it didn't move. Annoyed, he looked inside his pocket and grabbed the key. He still wasn't used to having a key. Once inside, the first thing he did was cross the Saturday off, and with that, the first of the 2 weeks he had left had already ended. He started to shiver when he saw how many days there were left. 1 week. 7 days. Only 7 days. He didn't want to think about that. He took his pajama off and dressed up as fast as he could. He wanted to get away from there, to go and get distracted with his dad. He practically ran away from his room, closing the door with a bang as he dashed downstairs. The entry door was opened, and he heard the sound of one of the Vanzilla's door being closed. As he walked to the door, he looked at both sides of the hall. At his left, Laurie and Lenny were still finishing the breakfast at the table. His younger sisters seemed to be in the kitchen, eating too. At his right, Luna, Luan, and Lynn were sitting on the couch with the TV turned on, although none of them looked especially interested in what was going on. Closing the entry door behind him, Lincoln felt a little bummed out at his sister's sudden change of attitude. He got in the van to the passenger seat, put his seat belt on, and waited for his father to turn on the engine. "Are we really going to the museum?" he asked. He didn't doubt his father would think that would cheer him up, but it was really hard to imagine him deciding that was a perfect way to spend what could be his last Sunday. "Of course not," answered Mr. Lynn, finally turning on the van. "I only said that so none of the girls would like to come with us." Said Lincoln, completely surprised. "So where are we going?" Vanzilla left the driveway and headed down the street away from the museum. "We're going fishing, son." The 50-minute drive to Silver Lake, the most famous lake in Royal Woods, passed incredibly fast for Lincoln. At first, neither he nor his father spoke a lot, with the latter asking him trivial questions about breakfast, traffic, and even reaching the awkward point of talking about the weather. Lincoln answered the best he could, but he was having trouble feeling comfortable. It wasn't easy to talk when they both knew there was more important, evident conversation that neither one of them wanted to start. Luckily, his father changed the radio station, and there was a song playing, one they both immediately recognized, although their opinions about it were polar opposites. "Oh dear God, what have they done?" indignantly complained Lynn Sr. "How dare they profane this song? This way! Life is a highway! Tom Cochrane's best song! This song had a soul, you know. How dare they turn it into some pop record just like that?" "I like this song," said Lincoln with a smile. "It's in Cars, when Lightning McQueen was with his truck buddy in the road and they're driving the interstate highway." "Of course you like it. It's a great song. But if you knew the original, then you prefer it." "Even so, this one's really good." Turning up the volume. "A couple of years ago, Luna found me listening to it in my room. And when I told her I really liked it, she learned it in about half an hour on her guitar. We went to the garage and spent the whole afternoon singing it." His father smiled at his son's enthusiasm, whom had started to move his head to the rhythm. Lynn had his own motives to always prefer Tom Cochrane, but deep down he had to give it to Lincoln. It was an awesome cover. Before any of the two could realize it, they were both singing the chorus out loud. "Life is a highway, I wanna ride it all night long. If you're going my way, I wanna drive it all night long." They both knew the lyrics, so they had fun taking turns to sing each verse. When the song ended, father and son were laughing out loud in the front seat of the van. "Well, it wasn't that bad after all, huh?" said Lincoln. "I got to admit, it was pretty good," conceded Lynn. "No one can top Tom Cochrane, though." "Who is that guy, anyway?" His father gave him a look of fake disgust. "These kids nowadays, they don't know the legends. A great musician, that's it. For your information, your sister Lynn is named after him." "What?" asked Lynn, staring at him without understanding, believing that this was maybe another one of his dumb jokes. How could she be named after a guy named Tom?" "He was born in Lynn Lake, a Canadian city." Hearing no response from his son, Lynn Sr. turned to look at him, finding a surprised and shocked face. "What? I'm serious. Why did you think she was named like that?" "Oh, I don't know," said Lincoln, the sarcasm in his words painfully evident. "I have this crazy idea that she was named after her own father." Lynn Sr. let out a chuckle. "Oh, Lincoln, do you think your mother would let me name her like that if it wasn't because she was also a big good fan of good old Tom? It wasn't that hard to make her mind, especially since... Oh wait, this is another great song." The station put a classic 80s song that Mr. Loud had danced in his younger years and that Lincoln knew thanks to Luna. They started to sing once again, and then they sang the next song. And then the next. Michigan is known as the Great Lakes State. It limits with 4 of North America's 5 Great Lakes, which makes him one of the most beautiful states in the U.S., a wonderful place to visit and appreciate the nature. Lincoln, in theory, knew these things. They taught him that in school. He heard it from his parents, and he'd seen images in the internet and movies. He knew that he lived in a state with natural wonders, like Grand Venture Canyon. But it wasn't until he stood in the bank of the Silver Lake that he was fully conscious of that fact. His father had driven by the highway until he reached a small, sinuous road that led inside a forest. He drove for a few more minutes until the trees were opening up and they finally reached the lake. It was enormous. Standing near the bank, Lincoln calculated that there had to be at least 250 yards to the other shore. Not only he could see the beautiful image of the water reflecting all the trees surrounding it in the blue sky, He could also appreciate the silhouette of the mountains standing proud on the horizon. Lincoln just stood there contemplating the view. Had he known something so beautiful like what he was seeing exist so close to his house, he would have made an objective for his bucket list to visit it. The lake was so beautiful, so mirrored. He couldn't resist the temptation. He grabbed the flattest stone he found and threw it with all his strength. It skipped 5 times on the water's surface before it finally sank. Lincoln closed his fist in the air, satisfied with his throwing skills. Lynn would have been completely jealous. "Lincoln, are you trying to scare all the fishes away? Get here and help me unload the van!" Lincoln did as his father told him. In the back seat, covered by a blanket so the girls wouldn't accidentally spot it, Lincoln found all the fishing stuff he'd seen in the garage the previous afternoon. His father grabbed the fishing rods, a bag with some clothes, and a cooler filled with baits and their lunches. Lincoln, meanwhile, took the 2 folding chairs that were there, and with some difficulty carried them near the bank. "Actually, Lincoln," his father suggested, putting things in the ground, "why don't you put the chairs in the water? There's nothing like fishing with a feeling of the lake on your ankles." Smiling at the idea, Lincoln took off his shoes, his socks, folded up his jeans, and did as he was told. The water was cold, but it felt nice to step on the wet clay. His father handed him a hat to protect his face from the sun, and a fishing vest just for the sake of aesthetics. Then they both grabbed a fishing rod, and only a few minutes after getting to the lake, father and son were casting their lines as far as they could. "So now what?" asked Lincoln with a smile. "Now we wait." Lincoln nodded. He knew there wasn't much to do now that the bait was on the lake. Fishing was a sport of patience. "Hey, Dad?" "Yes?" Was that thing you said about Lynn true? Did you really name her like that because it was the city where that singer was born?" "Absolutely," answered Lynn Sr. as he made a little movement with his rod to adjust the line tension. "I mean, obviously there was also the fact that she would be named after me. But, you see, he's not just a favorite singer of your mother and me. It was also his music that was playing when..." Lynn cleared his throat and wasted some time, needlessly adjusting some bait ornaments on his hat. "Well, let's just say that he was very involved in Lynn Jr.'s conception." "Dad," complained as he laughed, moving his foot to sprinkle his father. "TMI!" "Well, you asked me!" They started to laugh. A real fisherman would have been indignant with all the noise they were making, but neither Loud was actually worried about that. "And how did you choose all of our names? I mean, why do all of our names start with L?" Lincoln asked curiously. Why they all had the same initials was a mystery between the Loud children, and they never dared to ask their parents about it. "That's a really good question, son. It's in your right not to believe me, but the truth is, it's not something we did on purpose. We had our own reasons to name you all the way we did. Some of those reasons may have made more sense than others, but some of them are more important, but we always had a motive to name you like we did." "And what were they?" "Oh, okay. Let's start from the beginning. Laurie is the name of an old friend of mine, who gave me the 12th best gift I ever received in my whole life." "The 12th?" asked Lincoln, raising an eyebrow. "She introduced me to your mother," he simply answered. "She moved away to another state some years after introducing us, and eventually we stopped being in touch with her. But, well, your mother and I were together for about 3.5 years, and then we had a fight. A very serious fight." Lincoln smiled at his face. "You and Mom had a fight?" he asked. "Yes. It was nonsense, really. I can't even remember how it all started, you know. But we were young and susceptible, and I decided to break up with her," he sadly said. his eyes lost in the reflection of the mountains on the surface of the lake. Lincoln gasped. You broke up with her? But how? How did you make up? Laurie. She came back from the other state? No. Laurie, your sister, he explained. Your mother was pregnant. When she found out, she didn't want to tell me at first. But we finally met up for a talk, and she told me. And, well, we weren't in the best terms, But it was our child. It wasn't just about us anymore. We had to think about what was best for our child. So we put aside our differences and we tried to form a family once again. By the time Laura was born, Rita and I were back in love. And we realized that we were back together thanks to the baby. She had brought us together again. And we decided to name her after the old friend who presented us in the first place. So we could all remember that it was all thanks to her that we were happy together. Wow, said Lincoln, raising his eyebrows and letting out a small whistle. I never guessed that you guys have been that close to breaking up. But destiny wanted us to make a family, he said, calming down. And boy, did we comply. The boy with the orange polo chuckled. What about the rest? Why Lenny? Oh. That's a story we don't usually like to tell, he answered, shaking his head. You see, Lincoln, she had difficulties during her pregnancy. Troubles? Lenny was born a month ahead of schedule. It really wasn't that bad. The hospital was very well prepared. But we were still new parents. Laurie was born less than a year prior, and to see our little girl in an incubator, it wasn't easy. We were really scared. And then, during our second night in the hospital after she was born, a nurse came to see us. She looked like a prison cook, Lincoln. I swear, her arms were bigger than my legs. At first I thought she was going to hit me. But she didn't. She sat with us for hours, letting us know that it was all going to be okay, soothing your mother. She even cradled little Laurie to sleep. We were really scared, and that wonderful nurse helped us. He made a small pause, during which his smile came back, and he turned around to see Lincoln. Can you guess what that beautiful lady's name was? Lenny, said Lincoln, suddenly understanding. His father nodded, and they both smiled in silence for a few seconds. The rest of the names don't have such sad stories, he assured him. When your mother was pregnant for our third daughter, there was a night when we went out for a walk in the park, taking Laurie and Lenny in the double carriage. We were just thinking how to call this new girl, when we stopped to stare at the sky. The stars were sparkling that night, and there was a full moon. It was beautiful, the most amazing view we had in a long time. Then we started to think about a name that we could be as pretty as that image. We thought about Star, Pearl, but in the end we decided to call her Luna, which means moon in Spanish. What about Luan? Asked Lincoln, fascinated for being able to discover such interesting information about his family's past. Why did you choose that name? No, that's a funny story, said Lynn Sr., giggling a little, which is ironic. So, when your mom was going through her fourth daughter, Laurie was about to turn 3 years old. We were trying to teach her how to pronounce all the family names, but there was no way we could make her say Luna properly. She kept saying Luan for some reason. Don't ask me why. She just did. And then he had to stop for a few seconds so he could laugh. Okay, so hear this. I thought it'd be hilarious if we called our new baby Luan, just to confuse little Laurie a bit more. But boy, not only Laurie, All of you had always had trouble learning to distinguish between Luna and Luan. Lincoln shook his head, smiling from ear to ear. You're lying. No, I'm serious, son. And how did Mom agree to this? Turns out she also has a sense of humor after all. Alright. Let's just say that for now, I believe you, said Lincoln with a smile, and a tone that hinted that he wasn't really buying that story. You already told me about why you chose Lynn's name. And then... Of course you were waiting for this moment. Well, as you know, after Lynn Jr.'s birth, it was a while before we decided to have you. You said that like it was a big deal, but I think it's normal for any family to. The thing is, his father interrupted him, that we decided to have another baby. And when the doctor told us it was a boy... Look, the truth is, I had actually lost hope of ever having a boy in the family by now. I'm not complaining. I love all my little girls. You guys are the best 11 gifts life has ever given me. And you will always be. But when I knew I'd be having a boy, I decided I couldn't name him lightly. I always knew you were going to be an extraordinary boy. I knew it right from the start. That's why I decided that you would be called after the best man this wonderful country has ever given to humanity. After the United States' greatest president. Oh. So I am named after Abraham Lincoln after all, he said, slightly disappointed. His friends had always had that theory about his name, and it's not like he was bothered by it. But after such interesting stories around the election of his sisters' names, Lincoln was expecting something a bit more interesting. Lincoln, I'm really sorry if you don't like your name, said his father, downhearted. There are risks every parent must take. We never know if our kids will like the names we impose on them. But you need to know that I named you that way because ever since I saw you on our first ultrascan, I knew you were destined to do big things. Maybe you won't be president, and maybe you won't change the whole world. But you have changed our family forever. Lynn stopped his explanation, saying something had taken the bait. He stood up and started to move his fishing rod, but Lincoln knew that no fish had been close to touch the bait. He didn't complain, though, since the pause also helped him to keep his emotions under control. Dang it! I think it escaped, said Lynn, lacking conviction, as he cast his line again. So what about the other names? Skipping any discussion about Lincoln, his dad told him the origin of the younger siblings. He told him that Lucy was named after the famous song that put her in the sky with some diamonds around her, a song that was playing on the radio on the night during Rita's 7th pregnancy, and that Luna had taught to the rest of her siblings, so the whole family could sing it along. Mr. Loud also told him that Lola had been the nickname with everyone knew Lincoln's paternal grandmother, and that Lana had been his maternal grandmother. Pop-Pot's wife, Lisa, had been named after one of Rita's old friends who helped her get into college. And finally, Lily was named after Harry Potter's mom. Since when do you like Harry Potter? Asked Lincoln, between chuckles, not believing what he just heard. Son, you were just a baby, so you don't remember this, but I spent 20 hours in a line dressed as Sirius Black to get my signed copy of the Deathly Hallows on its release day. I was really into naming our 11th child Emma after the actress. But, well, remember when I told you we hadn't chosen all your names starting with L on purpose? Well, I think we ended up choosing Lily because it certainly fitted with the rest of you. Wow. It's amazing. I can't believe I didn't know anything about this. None of you ever can ask about it, simply said Mr. Loud. I'm not judging you. It's just that we all live so rushed nowadays. We have so many things to do that we just don't stop to simply talk, you know. I mean, when was the last time we had a real father and son bonding moment, eh? I think that, well, when you taught me to prepare your special linguine. Oh, you mean my Lynn Queenie? He said, laughing the same way Luan did after one of her puns. Lincoln, in response, let out a frustrated groan just like he always did with Luan. Son, his father stuttered with his gaze lost in the horizon. I know I'm your father and that my job is to take care of you, teach you all I know, and make sure you don't set the house on fire. But just for today, do you think we could just be friends? What do you mean? Asked Lincoln, a bit distracted by a flock of birds that started to fly away from the treetops on the other side of the lake. I mean that I want to know you, son. Lincoln completely forgot about the birds and focused his attention on his father. Dad, I just want to know more about you. What's your favorite color? What's your favorite band? Was there any sport you liked to practice and you didn't tell us? Or you tell us and we didn't let you? What's the deal with that ace savvy you like so much? I want to know you better. I want to know more about my little champ, he resignedly said. Lincoln thought about the talk he had with his sister Lynn just 2 days ago. She was one of the siblings he spent most of the time with, and yet there was a lot of things he didn't know about her. Living under the same roof made them family, made them close, but that wasn't really enough to know someone on a deeper level. Orange, said Lincoln, as he slowly moved his bare feet on the water. His father stared at him. My favorite color is orange, he explained to him. I think it's always been like that. And Smooch is my favorite band. Luna was always showing me their songs, and I think they are the best band ever. Tell me more, asked Lynn, so focused on his son that he didn't realize that there was something in the lake pulling his bait. His father asked him to tell him more, and Lincoln complied. He told him about all of his likes and hobbies, about how Bobby made him love monster truck rallies. He had told him about his favorite novels. He also took a whole hour to explain his father the main arcs from Ace Savvy, including Crisis on Infinite Decks, the Card of Owls, and his historic clash against Captain Yahtzee, the most powerful superhero from Casino Comics. After that, his father decided that was probably a good moment to have some lunch, so they let their rods aside and grabbed some sandwiches from the cooler. While they ate, his dad asked him if there were any girls he liked. A little flustered, Lincoln told him about how much he liked Christina at first, and then he told him that right now, all his interests in the opposite gender was centered on Ronnie Ann. He told his dad about their relationship and how it evolved, from their first kiss to their double date at John Juan's. He took his time to explain in detail all the things he felt when he was with her, about that sensation of feeling like he could be his true self without being judged. Wow, son, I would have never guessed you could have had such deep thoughts at such a young age, said his father, fully impressed. When I was your age, I wasn't impressing girls yet. I still thought of them as weird things in nature. It's not something I usually talk about, Lincoln admitted. I haven't even told Clyde these things yet. I never thought I'd be discussing them with my dad. I get it. I didn't talk much about my life with your grandpa. My dad was, well, he had been raised in a different time. Things were different back then. He was a very strict man with very clear values. He was dedicated to his work, and family usually came after that. He didn't love you? Asked a worried Lincoln. Of course he did. My father loved me. It's just that he wasn't very fond in showing it, you know. He never liked my jokes, or that I loved dancing so much. He wasn't the kind of father that read me stories to fall asleep at night, or went to see me in my school plays. That's not right, said Lincoln, frowning. Dads are supposed to be there with their kids. They need to show them their love, just like you and Mom do with us. Lincoln, I don't want you to have a bad image of your grandfather. He woke up every day at 6 in the morning and got back at 8 in the evening. He had to drop school when he was only 10 so he could go to the factory to work with his father, my grandpa. He worked his entire life to make sure that we would have food on our plates every day, and so I could finish my studies and not repeat his steps. Lynn closed his eyes and let out a shy smile, reminiscing about prior times. When I finished high school, he asked for a day off at work so he could attend my graduation. He didn't tell me he would, he simply went there. I'd never been so happy in my life, and neither had him. That was the same day that he gave me my first car. He told me I had earned it, and when your mother and I moved in together, out of the house was unfinished. It needed a lot of work to be done. Your grandfather spent his life saving so we could buy everything we needed to finish it. Really? Yes. It's a pity he died so soon. Luan wasn't even born yet. I know he would have loved to meet the rest of you, and he would have loved to be here with us right now. He always brought me here for fishing. I loved spending those afternoons with him. Lincoln felt a void in his chest. He'd never been this close, this personal with his father, and there were so many things he would have liked to ask him, so many things he wanted to know. But primarily, there was a question he didn't dare ask. He didn't want to ruin the moment. He didn't want that nice talk to turn to an awkward or sad moment. Still, Lincoln wanted so much to ask him then, so many years after his father's death, after losing a loved one, if he still found himself thinking about him, if he still missed him. He wanted to know if someone could ever completely move on over such a loss. He wanted to ask him that, but he couldn't gather enough courage. You really loved him then? He asked and said, Of course, Lincoln. He was always there when I needed him. He was the best father he could manage to be. And God knows I didn't make it any easier for him. I wasn't exactly an angel. Those words reminded Lincoln of an item on his objectives list. Dad? Tell me. There's something I need to tell you. What is it? Well, Lincoln took a deep breath, prepared himself, and finally said it. I broke your disco ball. I was playing with my remote control plane and I couldn't dodge it, and it blew into a million pieces. I should have told you, but I was afraid of being punished, and then Lola took the blame because she wanted to earn our trust, and... Son, he stopped him. Take it easy. No, Dad, I lied. I didn't tell you the truth, and then I let you guys ground her for things she didn't do. Lincoln, it doesn't matter. But do you really think I could be angry with you right now just because you broke a stupid award? I guess not. Of course not. It doesn't matter anymore, son. I appreciate you telling me the truth, though. Lincoln wasn't fully convinced about his father's words. He still felt bad. Speaking of breaking stuff, said Lynn Sr., what happened at breakfast today? Oh yeah, that. He summarized the best he could the morning incident. The twins fighting, the broken glass, what he had told Lola, how he and Lori had spoken with each twin to cool them off. His father listened to every word, smiling after hearing what his son had said to Lola. Lincoln, I'm so proud of you. Your mother and me regret not having told you this sooner, but we really appreciate everything you do for your sisters. You always help us take care of the younger ones, and you make sure the older ones don't get out of control. You don't have to thank me, he said, shrugging it off. They're my sisters. It's my job to love them and take care of them. Yes, but you do more than that, son. I don't think you realize that. But even without you knowing it, you've taken a responsibility that doesn't belong to you. You're the middle child. You're the only boy in a family full of girls. You could have been an irresponsible, selfish kid trying to survive in this chaotic family. You could have let Lori, Lenny, or Luna try to take everything under control. But instead you chose to live, trying to make everything easier for everyone else. And that, Lincoln, you're the son every father wishes he could have. And I can't stop feeling lucky for having had the chance of being your father. Dad? I'm sorry. I don't want to cry neither. But I got to say it. You were born in a family different than the rest. In a big family. And I love you so much. I love you all. And I just want to give you the best. And sometimes I wonder. Sometimes I wonder I, if I failed in that. What do you mean? I mean, I couldn't give you the life you deserve, he said, raising his voice and throwing his rod to the water, scaring away all the fishes in the lake. After Lucy's birth, your mother had to find a new job because my wage wasn't enough. And even so, we barely had enough money. The house is falling to pieces. The car is falling to pieces. Dad? Said Lincoln, stopping him, leaving his rod aside too, and leaning on his chair to be closer to his father. Don't say that. We are not poor. You guys always buy the things we need. Those are always second-hand stuff, Lincoln. You sleep in a closet. I like my room. It's more than that. I'll spend the rest of my life regretting all the things I couldn't give you. He moaned, and the pain in his voice caused a chill to run down Lincoln's spine. I couldn't take you traveling to another country. I couldn't take you to those expensive conventions you always liked. A year ago, you asked me to start going to a comic book drawing course, and I didn't have the money to sign you up. I told you no, and now you won't be able to learn it. I don't care, he said, and he was being completely honest. Dad, I mean it. I don't care. I'm happy with what I have, especially for having you guys with me. There was no need to keep pretending being strong anymore. His father stood up and lifted him up in his arms just like when Lincoln was a little boy. The white-haired kid embraced his dad's neck with his arms, and they both let the minutes just pass on the bank of the wonderful and not so silent anymore Silver Lake. In just a few hours of shared time with his father, Lincoln had learned a lot of things from him. He learned about the story behind his sisters' names, about critical moments in his parents' marriage, about his paternal grandfather. And also, unfortunately, he had the possibility to learn something else. He had the opportunity of seeing, feeling, and listening to the pain of a grown man losing the most important thing in his world, in his life. Lincoln found out how does a man who lost his son sounds. It wasn't like crying with his sisters. It was different than crying with Luan or Lynn. It was even different than crying with Luna, even though they both had cried their hearts out the night before. It was simply a different intensity, impossible to compare, impossible to ignore. A lot of time passed until they both could control themselves, grabbed their rods again and sat on the chairs. It took them even more time for one of them to break the silence. Lincoln, there's something you need to know. What is it? Last Friday, after Lynn ran away from school, your mother had to go to school to talk with the principal, and she had to tell him everything. Lincoln led her aside that extended for more than 5 seconds. He had not wanted to think about it, but he assumed something like this might have happened. I understand. They would have expelled her, his dad explained like he needed to justify what they'd done. We talked with the kid's family and the principal, and they understood. When they realized what was going on, some classmates confirmed that this Ryan kid had said the wrong things at the wrong time. They only suspended Lynn for 3 weeks. Lincoln nodded. They understood why you didn't go to school this past week, and we also told the principal that the rest of your sisters won't be attending school for a while neither. No one? No. Your mother and I believe they deserve the chance of spending as much time as possible with their brother. The principal said not to worry. They'll be able to reinsert themselves in school whenever they feel ready. Do you understand what this means? I think so. They said nothing else while Lincoln started to think and how this changed everything. I'm sorry, son, but it's about time you talk with your younger sisters. We can't You can't keep waiting. I know. I'll tell them tomorrow. Is that okay? Of course. Do you want us to help you? Thanks. But no. I want to tell them personally. It has to be me. Okay. After 10 more minutes of silence, Lynn stood up. Want to go back home? But we didn't catch any fish. I know, but that was a disaster. That's why I hated fishing. Added Mr. Loud in a low voice, while he grabbed his chair and carried out of the water. You hate fishing? But didn't you say you loved fishing with your dad? Lincoln. As he started to put away the baits and hook, Lynn smiled at his son. When you take your son out for fishing, you don't really do it because you want to fish. Vanzilla parked in the driveway at 4:30 in the afternoon. Lincoln and his father carried down all the fishing equipment and stored it where it belonged. Lincoln received the pleasant surprise of seeing that most of the Luna's instruments and amps were no longer in the garage, which meant that she had taken them back to her room. He wanted to think that their talk last night had helped her realize that music was not the problem. If she understood that now, he could focus more on trying to ease the pain. His hyperactive mind started to come up with different courses of action about how to proceed with each one of his sisters, and he was so distracted in his train of thoughts that before he realized it, his father and him had finished putting everything in place. All right, son, I won't bother you any more today, said Mr. Loud, closing the garage door. Dad, don't say that, replied Lincoln, hugging his father. I really loved this little trip with you. Thank you. No, Lincoln, said Lynn Sr., kneeling so he could fully embrace his son. Thank you. Now, go and have fun doing whatever you want, okay? All right. They broke away from the hug, and Lincoln started to walk to the house entry when his father called him one more time. Oh, and Lincoln, anything you need, anything you want to do, just ask me. Anything that's in my power to do, take it for granted. Lincoln just nodded and smiled. Thanks. He went inside his house and was received by the classical, loud house chaotic noise. He heard a lot of movement upstairs, which was probably Lynn's doing. He also heard music, some drums, which could only be thanks to Luna. It seemed that things were slowly going back to normal. The question was, how long would that little peace last? How much longer could he keep it until the storm came down on them with all its wrath? Lincoln! Luan, who was sitting on the couch, quickly got up and walked closer. She hugged him, almost lifting him from the ground, but released him right away. She took half a step back, and her right hand almost unconsciously went straight to her brother's left cheek, gently stroking it like she was trying to make sure that she could touch him, that he was still there. Is everything okay? Did you have fun at the museum? She asked, and she wasn't trying to mess with him. She was just asking with full honesty. I'm okay, Luan, he said, putting one hand over his sister's. I had an awesome time. Glad to hear it. He wanted to go to his room, at least sit down a bit so he could process the long talk he had just had with his father. But he could see Luan struggling to come up with some way to start a conversation, to have an excuse to talk with him. So he silently waited for her to break the ice. So, I was thinking about that little project we're working on, she said, almost in a whisper. Lincoln knew what she was talking about. Luan was helping him prepare something that was one of the priorities on his bucket list, barely less important than those objectives that were directly focused on helping his sisters and make them feel better. It was, in a way, one of the most important things that he was going to be able to do before he died, and it was all possible only thanks to Luan. Yeah, what about it? He asked with interest. Well, I know you probably have a lot of things to do, but if you want, we could all keep making progresses today, she suggested, speaking in a kind of shy and embarrassed way. I do have a lot of things to do, yes, but I would love to advance a little more with that, Luan, he said, making her smile. Just let me go to my room to check something I need for it, all right? Yes, definitely. I'll get everything ready. Luan went all the way upstairs and into her room. Lincoln slowly climbed up with each step. He stopped in front of his door, and he remembered the bump he had given himself that morning just before he hadn't unlocked the door. Smiling, he moved his hand to his pants, looking for the... His smile faded away in an instant. He checked his other pocket, finding nothing but air and dust, and then he started to think. That morning, his dad had sent him upstairs to change his clothes. He hit his head. He quickly dressed up and then... Oh no. He put a shaky hand on the doorknob and turned it. To his utter horror, it was unlocked. Any kind of dread he was feeling, however, was multiplied by 10 when he opened up his door more and saw, standing in front of his calendar and with his objective list in her hands,